For those of you who maybe don't know them, Glen and Joan Mitchell are here, or anybody who might be watching us as this gets broadcast on TV. Glen and Joan are missionaries in Africa, in Kenya, the land of Kenya, and they're going to be bringing their ministry to us and kind of letting us know what's been going on there as they've been there for the past 5 years, and as they are home now for about a year, I think, before they head back in August for another 5-year stint in Kenya. So we're excited to have them here. Our church has been partnering with them as best we can. We're a small church, but just praying for them, and they're good about letting us know what the needs are. And so we're excited to be able to meet them. For me, meeting them for the first time. And even if you're watching on TV, and maybe you were just channel surfing today or tonight, whenever this is broadcast, and you just happen to stop and say, what in the world's that guy doing on TV? I just want to say to you that there's a reason why you stopped on this channel and why you need to see what's about to be presented. So my challenge to you is this: as you listen and as you watch, don't just try to observe, gain facts. Don't try to just learn some head knowledge. But I want you to think about what it is that God might be speaking to you. What is it that why is it that God wanted you to hear this? What is it that God wants to impart to you? Every one of you and me have a calling that God has on our lives. There's a reason why you exist, and there's a reason why He's exposing you to this information and to this ministry in particular. And so I want you to ask yourself the question: how can I be partnering, or am I to be partnering in this ministry in some way?
Who has a responsibility in this Great Commission? And we go to Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world. The key part there is go ye, go you. It's not just the Mitchells. It's every single person in this room. We spent over 10 years in Calvert County. We lived in Huntingtown, right down the road, and we raised 4 beautiful children there. We were plugged into this county like no tomorrow. And whether it was teaching them t-ball or fast pitch or bowling or whatever it was, all we did was we just came alongside people, and we just lived life with people. And then ultimately people came to know Christ as a result of us just coming alongside people. Was at the end of the day, what it is everybody's looking for something today. Everybody's got that place inside them when there's that empty spot, and they're looking for what's going to fill that void in their life. And ultimately that's Jesus Christ. And what ends up happening when they see you on the highways and the byways, on the streets, in the stores, and they see something different in your life, that's what they're attracted to. They're not attracted to you or I'm just an ugly old guy here. But what they see is they see Jesus Christ in you, and that's what they're hungry for, and that's what they want. So again, just because go ye, it's go you. It's every single person in this room, and just taking up that cross every day and going out there. We don't have to stand on a street corner and beat people over the head. Really what we need to do is just come alongside, put our arm around that person that's hurting, that person that's broken, and just share with them and just let them know that there is hope. And again, that's all that we did when we lived here in Huntingtown. And as God found us faithful here in this particular venue, He ultimately said, well, I've got another place for you. And little did we know back in the day that we would be living in Africa. That was the farthest thing from our mind. We owned a business. I was a contractor for the U.S. government for 20 years. And life was going great. We built a house, 4 young kids. Everything was just going along beautifully. And then one day, little by little, in Africa, they say poli-poli. That's slowly by slowly. God started working in our lives and bringing people into our lives to say, I've got another plan for you. And little did we know that it was it was Africa. This is my lovely bride, Joan, up here, who was introduced earlier. Pastor Desi, thank you for having us here. Jeff and Tom, thank you guys. I got off track and just started running like a rabbit. But hey, thank you guys again for just allowing us to even be here. We have 4 children, Cassidy, Luke, Jack, and John. Sam. Yeah, okay, I'll get it together. they had off President's Day, but it's supposedly it snowed one day down in North Carolina, so they took that snow day from us, and the kids have to go to school on Monday. So we were supposed to be here for 3 days visiting, and so things kind of got mixed up a little bit there. But we apologize that our kids are not here, because our kids, obviously, again, these guys, they're just as much a part of the ministry too. Again, in just the way that they can get out there into the neighborhood and the schools and all of that and witnessing. So again, we are very grateful for our children. Anyway, when we were here in the county, we were discipling people. We were just, working one-on-one with, I was working with men, Joan was working with women. And again, this was all just part of just God just using us, again, being found faithful wherever we're at. So many times in life, we're thinking, well, what does God have in store for me next? Or who is God, and how can I know him more, and what does he have in store for me tomorrow? And everybody wants to know what this plan is all about. Everybody is worrying about tomorrow. And at the same time, what God is doing is we really need to be found faithful today. And when I say faithful, it's just it's living a life, getting to knowing God, through prayer, through reading his word, and just having that that intimate, deep relationship with him. And then when we're found faithful in his will, and we have that proper relationship, then all of a sudden he's like, guess what I got in store for you? And then all of a sudden he starts using us in different ways that we never thought we were capable of. Ultimately, again, God gave us a burden for Africa, of all places. And yes, we ended up in Kenya, which is you can see over here, it's on the east coast, just below the Horn, below Sudan and Somalia. When we realized that God was kind of working on our hearts about going out to Africa, we said, well, we should at least go out there and do a little exploratory trip and see if that's something that, really that's where God wants us to be. And no sooner than we got off the plane, and they had Joan in a class teaching the very next day, and I was able to start a project with some of the construction guys there. I just wanted to work. We weren't there as tourists, and so many times we go through life as tourists, and it's like, no, let me roll up my sleeves and just and let's get to work, let's get busy. And we fell in love with the people. Africa's a beautiful country. The people are just amazing people there, and we just had the privilege of working with them for a short time and realized that this is exactly where God is calling us. Little did we know, sometimes we go through life and we go through different experiences. Like even now, you say, well, Father, why did you allow me to have this job or this experience? And why do I have this training? And how could God ever use all of that? And little did we know that by the time he took us to Africa, and he not only found a way to use a handful of our talents, he used every single talent, ability, gift we had, things we didn't know we had, abilities we had no idea, and he was able to really be glorified through all of that. So again, sometimes just count it a blessing for some of the things that we go through, and then ultimately how God is going to use that one day. So we end up in Africa, and we work at Rift Valley Academy, and it is a boarding school for MKs, missionary children, missionary kids. The parents work on the continent of Africa in one fashion or another. Let me have some jobs out there. We have pastor, and what are some other jobs we do? Tell me what's, yes? Elderly? Mechanic? Somebody else? What do you guys do?
He opens the bridges for Ocean City, Maryland.
Sweet. That's the gatekeeper. We have a lot of those over in Africa. Anybody else? What other jobs do we have?
Test software for the USDA.
Test wear officer. Okay. Test. Service tech. Some of the men and women that work over in Africa, when we think of missions and we think of missionaries, it's like, well, everyone's planning a church. We do have many church planners, and we have pastors. We also have teachers over there. We have pilots. We have doctors. We have nurses. We have accountants. We have engineers. We have people doing waterworks. If you name it, any of the jobs that are in this room, we can actually use those over in Africa. And that's what's so amazing, is to think that, again, how can God use me to open bridges in Africa, but yet it's a third world country. And they can, again, as we come alongside people, anything that we can do to help with the infrastructure and things like that, it's just incredible to see, again, how God can use our talents and our abilities. This school was started in 1906, And Teddy Roosevelt came over and laid the cornerstone in one of the original buildings there on campus. Africa Inland Missions runs the boarding school, and then there's 70 other agencies throughout the continent of Africa that send their children to this boarding school. We have anywhere from 24 to 32 different nationalities of children in this school. So it's a real cosmopolitan world, really dynamic group of young men and young women that are at this church, or at this school. The reason they send their kids to the school, sometimes the parents that are living in these continents, I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and then I'll come to the slide, and then I'll try to go through some of these slides, because we haven't had the chance, so there's a whole lot of like background information. Sorry, some of this is crazy. The parents work on the continent of Africa somewhere, and many times they'll homeschool the kids as long as they can, and then it gets to the point where they don't either have the infrastructure or the labs or the technical equipment to be able to take them a little bit farther, so then they're willing to send their kids off to the boarding school. Sometimes some of the parents working in countries, in closed countries, and in different areas where it's difficult for the parents, and sometimes there's actually security concerns, so the parents would have to send their children abroad to go to school. The children are in school for 3 months, and then they go home with their parents for a month, and then they're back for 3 months, and then home for a month, back for 3 months. So the kids actually have school year round. We have the privilege of living with these kids for 9 months out of the year, and their parents have them for the other 3 months. And I know that might sound like, well, how could anybody possibly send your child away? But yet, these kids are the most remarkable, unbelievable group of kids that you could ever imagine. The vast majority, or all of these kids, are for the most part from two-parent families who love the Lord, who are serving God somewhere on the continent of Africa. And then God has given them the burden to send their children to a boarding school where you have, there's about 125 missionaries working at the boarding school. And we're just loving, serving the Lord in any way. So we're trying to invest our lives and plug into these kids as well. And so these kids, I mean, they're just, where sometimes you might have, the vast majority of the kids that are just there and they're not really plugged in, and you have just a handful of kids that are just on fire for what God is doing. Well, at this school, the vast majority of these kids are just flat out sold out, for God, and these are going to be the world changers. These kids are going to be the ones that go into the world and just literally, they're going to turn it upside down, the kids that are coming out of this school. So needless to say, we're going to go ahead and just try to go through these slideshows. Otherwise, I could be here all night. I'd love to just keep sharing with you. My wife will give me the little sign to keep on plugging away. Oh, that's right. You're allowed to start snoring, okay, if I get boring, okay? It's okay. You can come up here and just throw it. All right, so we'll go on to the next slide. So this is the Rift Valley. Again, this is where we're at on the eastern side of Africa. Oh, yeah, we can do that, yeah, if you want to. Yeah. This is literally looking out at Longonot, and this is, we're in the Rift Valley, overlooking the valley. We're at 7,500-foot altitude, so we're kind of like up on the side of a mountain, overlooking the Great Rift Valley. And again, it's a beautiful place. Because we're at 7,500 foot, there's no mosquitoes, so we don't have malaria. So again, in God's omnipotence, figuring out things, that was an incredible opportunity to have picked such a place 100 years ago. And then with the water sources that we have as well, again, it's just incredible. And we'll just keep on going through here. This is John and Jennifer Brown. He's actually the director of Africa Inland Mission in Canada. And it was because of him and the burden that God kind of laid on our hearts through him. He had been serving over in Africa for 10 years. His wife, Jen, grew up here in the county. When John was a young man, he came down, and when he was going to Washington Bible College, he started courting her, married her, and then took her back to Canada. He came down each year to the local church to give his annual report of what was going on in Africa. And this went on for about 10 years. Well, about the 8th year he came along, it was after the missions conference. The following week we just happened to be in Ocean City, Maryland. and he was on his way back up to Canada and took some time off in Ocean City, and he came walking down the beach where we happened to be. Of course, there's millions of people there, and we were surprised to see John come walking down because he lives in Canada. So we sat on the beach, and we got to talking about Africa and what God was doing in the